welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm talking about Louisa May Alcott and Little Women in particular. But Louisa May Alcott was born in 1832. She grew up in a not very fun childhood, which, as she herself has said, is kind of why she tries to write these very positive and very fun-filled childhoods for her characters. They have troubles, and a lot of the time they're poor. They have these very warm and bright childhoods that I think she kind of was writing what she wished she'd had. I think it's interesting to note, especially when I talk about kind of the things that I think are flawed in her writing, that she didn't have a lot of young male influence. She grew up with, this transcendentalist father, who, greatly impacted the family in a lot of good and bad ways. Looking back, we would think that they were mostly bad, but, she did have a lot of respect for him. And then there were influences in her life, like a lot of these great intellectuals of the time, like Emerson, Thoreau, Longfellow, Hawthorne. She had these adult men in her lives and very unique and singular personalities, and I think that has affected her writing for sure. So I really like Little Women. I'm a big fan. I love the book. I enjoy some of the productions, which I'll talk a little bit about more later, but I don't like most of her other writings. I haven't read all of her books, but I've read Under the Lilacs, Jack and Jill, Eight Cousins, Rose and Bloom, and those books, none of them I care for a ton. Eight Cousins and Rose and Bloom are okay, but Under the Lilacs and Jack and Jill in particular, I really don't like, and they have a lot of the same problems for me. So, Louisa, like Jo in Little Women, seemed to have this, she really enjoyed male company. It's almost like feeding into this desire that she kind of talks about in Jo, maybe this tomboyishness, this kind of wishing to have been born a man. You kind of feel that in her writing and just her personality. She just really prefers boys in a lot of ways. In Jo, having this school for boys, she just really likes, she just really enjoys little boys and just thinks that they're a lot of fun. And she really liked to put a lot of that type of characters into her writing. But the problem, I think, is that she didn't have that in her life. So she was kind of making up this image that a lot of the time feels very fake to me. She didn't grow up with brothers. I did. And just reading, especially in Eight Cousins, in Under the Lilacs, in Jack and Jill, boys are not like that most of the time. And even when some are, in general, you read these and it really hurts the story because they feel very unreal. Most of these characters that she peoples her books with, that she clearly cares about so much, that she wants you to love. And you're like, this isn't how young people act. This isn't how young boys act. Very sentimental a lot of the time, and yet with this this toughness, but this nobility showing through, and just a lot of sentiment and emotion that is at least expressed in a way that boys really don't a lot of the time, in my experience. And that's just what I feel reading it. Reading it, I'm like, I don't buy it. I don't buy the story a lot of the time. I think this really was a failing on her part. The girls in her books are a lot more realistic, even when they're not good characters. Maybe if you don't like them, they are more realistic. And having said that, that's partly why I really like Little Women, because the male characters in that book, she gets so much better than any of her other things. And it is interesting to note, maybe because the male influences in her life were grown men, that she writes the adult men in her books quite well. Like pretty much all of them are really good. So that's just interesting. But in Little Women, she not only has a much more likable female protagonist than any of her other books that I've read. Jo is, clearly, obviously, the best character she ever did. The best protagonist. She is memorable, she's real, she's alive. But the male characters in her books are very good too. Like, Laurie is a little bit like some of those other boys in her books, but partly because he's alone. There's not like a whole group of boys that are all like this. Partly because he's kind of on his own and because of his unusual upbringing and stuff. He feels much more real. Like, I can believe his personality, I can believe his character. He works really good. He's a really fun character. His relationship with Jo is super fun. And then, of course, later on, Jo's romance with Mr. Bear is so good. He's a tremendous character. Who is very shortchanged most of the time in these movie adaptations. The father in Little Women is essentially non-existent, which is kind of interesting if he's supposed to be reflecting, the Alcott's father. And then even like Meg's husband, John, I think is done quite well in the book. So you have she did like multiple different types of men in this book, and she actually pulled it off. And I think that's partly why the book's so good, but also, of course, just Jo. Jo really dominates the book. And I think most of the reason why it's remembered and is by far her most famous classic is just the whole family dynamic of it. Her relationship with her sisters, her relationship with her mother, and then the romances. The book really has all the good elements that her other books are missing. And it's interesting too, like my sisters and I had this thing where we tried to find and watch every movie adaptation of Little Women that has been made. I think we're missing one. I think there's one that we still need to watch. But just to see the different things in that, there are some things that have become like tradition about Little Women. These like traditional moments that maybe never even happened in the book. Some very pivotal plot points that pretty much all the movies choose to use that didn't happen. One of the main ones is Mr. Bear reading Jo's work and reprimanding her for it, and then later reading her successful book and telling her that it's good. None of that ever happens in the book, and it's super annoying that they do that in every movie. Mr. Bear never actually read any of her trashy stories. He kind of knew that she was writing that kind of stuff, and he kind of very gently points her more in the right direction. But it's somebody else's story that he reads and is complaining about in this newspaper, and it kind of, makes Jo feel guilty because she admires him so much. And Mr. Bear, he's an excellent character, and he is a lot older than Jo. She really respects him, and just this gentle little hint from him makes her change her whole perspective. Like, she burns all her trashy stories, and she tries to do better. I hate how in the movies she responds to this direct reprimand from him, which of course never even happened, with a fit of anger. That is so false to both of their personalities. Jo is a very impetuous, maybe angry person in sometimes, but not with him. She admires him. She doesn't think of him in that way, like as somebody that she even loves. In that way, yet he's just her friend that she really admires and respects the wisdom of, and he just very gently kind of sets her straight. She learns from it, and this outburst that happens in most of the movies is really offensive to fans, true fans of the book. And yeah, it's funny the different ways that he's portrayed in all of the movies. Sometimes he's much closer to the book than others. Sometimes his character is like pretty well done, with that major exception. The newest movie is so good and so bad in so many ways. One of the great things about it, of course, is just the four sisters. And I think that the movie, as far as character goes, the movie actually improved every one of the sisters except for Jo. And I like Jo pretty well, but she doesn't quite hit the mark. She's a very, very difficult person to play properly. And so all the different actresses that have played her kind of did their own thing. And this newest one I do like the best. But again, she does not quite convey the real character from the book. But all the other sisters are much better. I have never watched an adaptation where I liked Beth until this newest one. I think she's amazing. And Amy actually kind of dominates the newest movie. She is by far the best Amy that there has ever been, because she's really she's a very weak character in the book. She's a weak character, and it's frustrating that she gets with Laurie, because even though I really love the romance between Jo and Mr. Bear, I was never satisfied with the romance between Laurie and Amy, really. But I do really like it in the new movie because Amy herself is so much improved. And Meg is a lot better. Meg is kind of this character in the book who's you're always told in the book that Meg is like so good, like she's a really good person. But all you really see of her are her faults. Be like, Meg is a very good person, but right now she's having this struggle, and it only tells you about the struggles. You don't really see her goodness. She only has moments when she's like being weak or complaining or having struggles with her husband. And so it's just kind of, even though you're told that she's good, you never see her good side. And the movie really brought that out and showed her to be a good character. Her relationship with Jo is really good. So the movie did so many things right and even improved so many things, but then in other things they fell very, very short. Marmie's a difficult character to do too. I don't hate her in the book. She's fine, but she's not my favorite, and she's difficult to do. I think that this newest movie, she is just incredibly annoying. Horrible actor choice. I know a lot of people might disagree with me about that, but yeah. Absolutely terrible. And then Mr. Bear, while he's nice and he's fun, he's far too young. He's too, what's the word? He's too romantic in the first place. Far too early on. I don't know. I'm glad that he was at least a likable character, but he's very different from the book, and that is just really disappointing. There's a lot of other big things that they changed, but I'm going to try to stop talking about the movie now. So yeah, I think Little Women is definitely Louisa May Alcott's top book, and again, really just coming back to Jo's character is what it really boils down to, even though all the elements of the book are good. All the relationships, all the male characters, just the different way that the characters mature and change, particularly Jo after Beth's death, the way that her character shifts and softens to where she, wasn't ready for romance before, and then she is. It just feels very real. It's very touching. And yeah, it's still not a perfect book, and I almost feel like people have held it up so much and kind of changed it in some ways into things that it's not, and kind of changed it into some things that are even better than it was. But it's still, in the end, a very fun, kind of comforting read. It just feels so safe to like go back to it, open it up, to start it again, while the girls are living. Well, they're all at home, and you really feel kind of some of the pain and sadness of like growing up as they're, getting married and moving out, and there's these new happinesses, but you feel the very the poignancy of that too, and some nostalgia for sure. The scene where Jo like goes to the attic after she is, I think, the last one left at home, goes to the attic and she's looking at all the little chests from all the sisters. I don't know. The book has also always been, the books and some of the movies are special to me because the relationships between the characters remind me of the relationships between my family. So it's just a special one, and I think it really is for a lot of people. Just really a story about family, about growing up, and I think it was definitely a hit for her among a lot of kind of misses, in my opinion. She's definitely not one of my favorite authors of all time, but this book is very, very special to America. It's a very special, especially American girls. It's kind of this American girl story that is very beloved to most people and also to me. So that's just some thoughts on Louisa May Alcott and Little Women. Thank you. I'll see you next time.